Welcome, fellow druids, to another Full Circle. I'm Chad, your host, Cheddar Caveman on lots and lots and lots of stuff on the interwebs. Today, in this episode, I'm going to resume my opposition series, this time talking about Cryx. We're going to try to do some more in this series since a lot of people have asked for it. I had hesitated initially to do more of them, primarily because I felt like I haven't played a sufficient number of games or anything like that. Basically, like, I want to make sure that I'm trying to give the best information for these. But some folks said that even if I felt that I hadn't, that it would be good. So I'm gonna do a few more of these. Cryx is a matchup I've played a decent amount, not a ton, not as much as I would like, given its place right now in the meta, I would say. But certainly enough to discuss it. So I don't remember how I broke the other ones down, but let's start off by talking about Cryx in a nutshell, what they're bringing, and then what we need to consider. So to start with, Cryx, if you've played the game for any amount of time, you've heard of Cryx. There was basically only about a year of Mark III where Cryx was considered not really a popular tournament option. That time has come and gone, and basically Cryx has always been a mainstay, if not the mainstay, faction in tournament play. They are known generally more for their infantry than their warjacks, although we'll talk about how that's changing. And they're generally known for throwing spells out there for debuffs. Their casters are generally incredibly powerful and have a pretty solid defensive stats. Their infantry is very good. I would not say their infantry is the best in the game, but their infantry is way up there. And certainly it's what they're going to use in, I would say, the vast majority of their lists to do the work. What that infantry is has shifted over time, but nonetheless. So a few other hallmarks of Cryx. One, they have the potential to bring a significant number of models and do work with them. They have the potential to take things that don't hit very hard and make them hit very hard. They have the potential to take things that are not very accurate and make them very accurate. They have an abundance of things that are incorporeal. They tend, similar to Circle, to not universally, but they tend to go a little higher on the defense, lower on the armor. But again, not universally, not at all universally. But they do sometimes go that way. As I mentioned, the warcasters tend to be very difficult to kill. They don't always rely on their warjacks, though that is something they now have the ability to do in Mark III that they really, really did not do prior to this edition. They have 6 theme forces, and in my opinion, they are all tournament viable. They have a pretty solid depth of caster, although one of the things, and this is unique, this is my observation, so this is going to be somewhat anecdotal, somewhat me trying to sort of like see a thing that, debatably is or isn't true, and but it's what I see, and this is my show, so I'm going to talk about it. But Cryx, much and I think you'll see this with Cryx and Signar especially, Khador a little bit, where once the factions are played by enough people and by enough people with enough tournament visibility that a lot of times the lists end up and the casters end up actually more homogenized in what you're going to see than, say, I mean, Circle kind of is right now even, but some of the Hordes factions, I don't think this happens quite as much, and I feel like there's a lot of, like, Cryx and Signar in particular, and like I said, Khador a little bit, all tend to sort of lean towards this, we've solved this pairing, this caster situation, and then you just see that for a long time in a lot of it. And that's fine, and actually to a degree that helps us plan, because right now, as I said, in my opinion, looking at Cryx, looking at their themes, and looking at the options in them, I think all 6 themes are viable. So let's talk a little bit though about what is actually pretty popular. So and by that I'm going to sort of eliminate it down, and we'll talk about like where it's going as well. So first, I think it's called Infernal Machines. I don't have my tablet open to the Cryx at the moment, so I'm going to go off of my like what I played. Infernal Machines is their theme that focuses on Mechanothralls, Soul Hunters, basically into the Thrall type things, not to be confused with Bane Warriors or anything Bane. No, it's undead stuff that isn't Banes and isn't Ghost Pirate, Revenant type stuff. So that's like Mechanothralls, Brute Thralls, Soul Hunters, primarily Bile Thralls, the Carrion Thralls, the birds that came out at the beginning of Mark III, stuff like that. The Wraith Engines in that theme. There's some bonuses for Warjacks in that theme, and a few other things. I find that theme is actually very viable. Soul Hunters are a really good unit. They're speed 9 with 2-inch reach in a faction with debuffs. I think they're actually a little underplayed. I think Brute Thralls are a little underplayed as well. And that's really the only theme because of that you're likely to see the Sepulchre, which in that theme might also be underplayed. I'm not as sure on that last one. You did see it for a while there because it was a good choice to bring your Wraith Engines in, which is a very strong piece. And I'm just going to talk about that real quick. The Wraith Engine is very strong because it is defense 12, armor 18, has mid-20s of boxes. I think it's 26 or 28. Has Incorporeal all the time, and has a rule that in its command of 10 inches, undead models gain +2 armor against range and magic attacks. And it, if you kill a model, if a model dies in its melee range, once per turn you can make a Machine Wraith, once per round. I'm not remembering exactly. Anyways, you can make a Machine Wraith solo. And it's 15 points. And it has effectively 3 POW 15 initials. So it's very, very strong, and it takes buffs very well. So this was one of the themes that you would see it in. It appears in 3 themes, essentially all the ones that focus on their undead infantry. It's a very good piece. You're going to see it. You're going to need a plan for it. We'll maybe break that down a little bit as I go on. So that's probably the least played theme. I think the next theme, which is funny, if we'd done this, I may have even done an episode on this theme in particular, but if we had done this episode 6 months ago, this would have been at the end of my list as the most played theme. But the next least played theme is actually going to be Ghost Fleet. So Ghost Fleet contains the Revenant Pirates, they have guns, Blackbane's Ghost Raiders, the Revenant Cannon Crew, the Wraith Engine as mentioned, there's a Rengrave, there's a couple solos. It contains Wraith solos, so Pistol Wraiths, and the Hellslinger, which is the Kane Pistol Wraith. And it is another, in my opinion, still very strong list. But it's also been sort of solved in a way, and it's been toned down. So the Revenant Pirates are no longer the powerhouses they were in Melee, because of the changes to them. Denegra, who was the most common to play them, is still very, very good, but has been toned down. And basically, at this point, it seems that Cryx players have drifted away from it, feeling that there are stronger lists, basically, is how they feel. I still feel like it's very strong, and I feel like as RFP is one of the things that really counters it, and there's some other specific things that you kind of need to counter it. And I think as those fade from the game for a little while, because this list sort of has faded away and people's answers to it can fade with it, that at some point it's going to crop back up and be very powerful. So what's strong about this list is you can bring a lot of Revenant Pirates. They have weapon attachments that are range 14, POW 10 guns, and then you add in the debuffs that a Denegra 1 can bring, and suddenly you have POW 15 guns. They can CRA to be POW 18 guns. The pistols on those guys are POW 10 as well. They can do a lot of damage. You've got things like their cannon. You've still got Blackbane's Ghost Raiders, so you've got this Incorporeal you need to solve for. You've got these models that just aren't going to die. in the Revenants, because they bring back D3+1 unless you have some very specific answers to their unit attack, their leader model. And you've got like a Denegar or a few of the other options backing up. So that's what you kind of have to be concerned with there. So if you do start seeing that in your area, just to talk about that real quick, or if it crops back up, you want to be able to, the best thing to do is be able to RFP the leader model, and then they can no longer, because you don't promote, you actually appoint a new leader, and that isn't the leader model. And the leader model is the one that has the return D3+1 grunts to play rule. So if you RFP that model, the recursion engine is turned off, and then you kind of play like a normal game against very poorly statted Revenants, and they're like 13/12s. So things that can do that are like Crevasse on Mosar and Baldur 2. Baldur 2 is particularly interesting because his Woldwrath actually is fairly resilient in that matchup because of Sacred Ward and +3 armor. There's a few others. Hellmouth on Wormwood can do it. The Bloodweavers have an RFP option. And that one's also good because if you RFP the models they want to return to the unit, that also will work. So you can, if you have a lot of RFP, just RFP everything you can. If you don't, you want to try to scalpel models out. There's some others. I'm not going to go over it all, but RFP is very strong in that matchup. So have that, have protection from ranged attacks, and have the ability to kill infantry. None of this is like Revelations, so I'm not talking about specific lists. If you can kill enough infantry fast enough, you also will be okay in that matchup. So Kruger 1 is still fine. Kruger 2 is largely still fine. Morvana 1 has... Oh, she's the other one with RFP. She has RFP and can remove a lot of infantry, so she's very good in that matchup, and so on. Okay, so that leaves us with the other 4 theme forces, and these are all pretty viable. So I'm just going to breeze through them, and then I'm actually going to talk about lists a little bit more. But we have Dark Host, which is the Bane theme force. We have Black Industries, which is their Warjack theme force. And then we have the 2 pirate theme forces. We have the one that's the Statixis theme force, and we have the one that is all the other pirate things. Real briefly, all the other pirate things. So far, we haven't really seen lists for that, but the releases are actually popping out right now for that theme. So I don't really have like a list to talk about with that, which is why I'm sort of high level talking about it. The one thing to watch out for is that Theme Force gives their Warjacks flank with a warrior model. So like that, nothing in the list hits super duper hard, but Cryx as always can make things hit really hard. And like giving flank to something like a Stalker Light Warbeast, which is a model we should probably talk about in general anyways, is incredibly strong. They go up to Mat 9, and they become POW 13 Weapon Masters on damage. And that's before applying Cryx debuffs or buffs, as the case may be. So I think that theme is incredibly good. I think you are really going to want to watch out for those Stalkers, and I imagine it will start to see play. Pardon me. Let's talk about the Stalkers real fast. Trouble piece number 2 that you will see in a lot of lists of, and we'll go back to talking about the Wraith Engine as well, but the Stalker is a light warjack that I think costs 8 points. It is speed 7, defense 15, armor 13, has stealth, sound familiar, has 18 wounds, it has 2 POW 13 1-inch melee initial attacks that have grievous wounds, and it has leap and extended control. I have mini rant. I have no idea why the Scarsfell Griffin can't have long leash and this model can. Be that as it may, when you see Stalkers on the table, the stats I just read on their own are maybe if you haven't played against them enough, they may, or if you don't play Scarsfell Griffins in our faction, those stats I just listed off may not sound terrifying. They are terrifying. The model, oh, it has Pathfinder also. I think I missed that. It has a 11-inch charge or a 13-inch walk jump attack. Mat 7 to begin with, grievous wounds, and Cryx debuffs. And access to Cryx debuffs. They also have ways to speed them up. You can put them on Iacos 1, and he has Escort. There's some other casters that have ways to speed him up. You can increase their damage with nearly any Cryx caster you're going to play. They will assassinate you if you're not careful. So know that. I talked about the Wraith Engine. The Wraith Engine is particularly problematic because if you have ranged attacks, you really need to kill it, and you need to make sure you have a decent number of magic damage, a decent amount of magic damage to deal with it. So we're Circle, we usually can do that, but make sure that if the list you're intending to play into Cryx needs an answer to a Wraith Engine, generally speaking. So you need magic weapons, and you need to be able to kill it. Preferably in melee or with a significant amount of firepower. Okay. So anyways, that theme, I think you're going to see Stalkers and Infantry in that theme. That's what I would play. I don't, like, nothing has really surfaced yet as, like, the competitive list with that, but look out for that. So that leaves the other 3. They're going to crop up here as we talk about them. The Satixis list is kind of the same list in a lot of different places. I think you're largely going to see a couple units of Satixis Raiders with their attachments. You're going to see a couple Satixis solos. You're going to see the 2 new Satixis solos, or 3 new Satixis solos as they come out. And then you're going to see 2 units of the three Satixis models with the 2 guns, and probably an ambushing unit of Blood Witches. I've seen this list with the Coven. I've seen it with Denegra. I've seen it with Asphyxius 1. I've seen it in a few other places. It's a very good list. They are very resilient at range. They're very fast. They hit hard enough. They have gang, so their stats are deceptively low again. They have a knockdown. They have a lot of knockdown, so anything you can bring to fight them that is immune to knockdown is going to be better. They can be played with Scar 1. I haven't seen that yet, but I suspect that they would be okay there still. Not as good as they used to be because the feat wants like more resilient, like more single target type buffs now, but with Denegra, you can also bring a Merc unit. I've definitely seen people try to get Nis Hunters in with them, either with the gun Satixis or in addition to. They are very hard to knock down because their solo gives them no sleeping on the job. And most importantly, they go up to like defense 16 against range attacks, and I don't remember if they're still immune to blast damage or not. Let's double check. This one's an important one, so hopefully more tablets charged up enough here. Sorry for the delay. Oh, that's the wrong attachment. Yeah, Whipping Winds, they gain Force Barrier, so the +2 defense and against ranged attacks specifically, and they don't suffer blast damage. So make sure the ways that you're trying to kill infantry don't overly rely on blast damage, or that you can, if you can snipe out the Sea Witch. Don't use any of the following for 1 round. So if you can like cycle out the Sea Witch 1 turn, then from there on blast damage will be online. That's of note, particularly with like Morvana 1, because the force spell that does the AoE doesn't, it's blast damage actually, not the direct hit but the outside hits, so keep that in mind. And if you can kill them with spells, you're going to be much better off because their defenses aren't keyed around that. It's specifically ranged attacks. So if you have decently efficient long-range melee attacks, so like something like Ravagers potentially, which are 11 inches, they threat like 11 inches on their own, and then they go up to 14 if Vengeance gets triggered. And they're mat 7, so they're hitting on 7s, and then you can make them mat 8 with the dude. Stuff like that's going to be very good, are typically pretty good against them. Hand of Fated guys with Overtake are pretty good, things like that. Like they can certainly be killed, just watch out for blast damage. And remember, they threaten a long ways, and you don't want to use like direct range attacks on them generally, just because of the high defense. So you're going to see that list in a few different formats, and those are what you want to be prepared for when you do. You're going to see the Bane theme, I think, for the most part. Right now, I'm mostly seeing it with Scar 1. There's a few variations. I've seen single Wraith Engine with 2 units of Cavalry, Bane Warriors, some other stuff. I've seen 2 units, I've seen 2 Wraith Engines with Bane Knights and Bane Warriors. You may still see the Coven variety with 2 units of Cav, 2 units of Warriors, and a Wraith Engine. If you can ignore Tough, that's really good. Keep in mind, like with Scar, that you actually do have to crack a significant amount of armor on her feat turn. So have a plan for that, like something that you can use to keep them away or whatever. Of course, the magic weapons I just mentioned. So that's that list. I don't want to go too deep into it because I kind of want to get to some solutioning before I check out here. And then the final list is Dark Industries. Right now there are exactly 2 variants and they play very different. There could be more than this, but there are 2 that are being played. One is Asphyxious 3 with 9 Slayers, 3 Arc Nodes, and some riffraff to score zones, basically. The thing to watch out here is those jacks are effectively 13-19 in melee. They are 13-21 against range. And they are speed 8 because of mobility. Gatsby has the way of getting a lot of souls potentially to turn into focus. Same with his feet. And this list may put you off of some of the typical Cryx answers because you do need to control or kill enough armor with your Cryx drop to take care of this list. So that's one. The other one is the Negra 2. She's going to bring... right now, most people are playing Aaron Whaley's list, which has 3 character jacks, 3 arc nodes, has Suffix Overlords for sprays, and it has support stuff in there. That list, again, is going to use magic weapons. You're going to have some pretty long assassination threats. You're going to have some ways to stymie your threat with Breath Sealer, and you are going to need to try to deal with Carapist, Incorporeal Deathjack, Nightmare, things like that. In particular with Denegra 2, watch out for her assassination. Hellmouth can move you 3 inches, as you should know because you play Circle. And additionally, she has an ability called Shadow Step. She's speed 7 with 2-inch melee, and if she hits you with her attack, she will place you a minimum of 4 inches from where you were standing to a maximum of 9, I think. And if that happens, you are probably dead. So, if you can be placed and she hits you. So, and that threat is about 15 inches, if I'm not mistaken, because of Shadow Step is 3, she's speed 7, she goes to 10, 2 inches on the melee. Watch out for that. You can add 3 inches potentially to that by using Hellmouth, but now there are resources being expended. Might change the situation. So that's a specific Denegra 2 problem. So now that I've spent a good almost over 20 minutes talking about all of the things that they do, what do we do? Well, you want to find things that answer that type of list. You want to, as I said, you want to make sure you have magic weapons. You actually do want to be able to deal with enough armor. And by that, things like Asphyxious, yeah, armor 19 is high, but the Slayers are not great once you can break an arm. But you do need at least a little bit of answer, at the very least a little bit of an answer to armor. You also should aim to, you need magic weapons, RFP is nice, and range protection is nice. Now the range protection is actually starting to become less necessary into Cryx because their guns are going away. You've got a few things. If you have any anti-magic stuff, that's great. That's why I spell-worded Woldwrath with Baldur 2 is really good. Druids, the Druids are actually exceptional into Cryx still because they have Sacred Ward and they're immune to corrosion and they have stealth, so like they kind of get around all the things you need to there. And their Theme Force gives you sack pawns, so if they do have ranged attacks, you can keep your models more safe, basically. Baldur 1, Morvana 1 are both great places for stuff like that. Even Una 2 do agree with that. Anything that can kill a decent amount of troops is good, but keep in mind you are going to be dealing with a variety of troops from like Bane Riders and Bane Warriors on down to things like Styxis that I just mentioned, and the little bit more resilient Cryx infantry, as I discussed, is now what's being played, so plan accordingly. If you can do it with War Beasts, you are going to have some additional flexibility that you otherwise wouldn't have. I actually think Routerhorn Griffins are something people should test if you are seeing a lot of Styxis, depending on the lists you're looking to play. Like with Chromac 1 and Kaya 2, they seem really interesting to me, and Una 2 potentially even, although the Pureblood does help that matchup as well. I am personally playing Una 2 in Devourer's Host, partially because I have access to the Shaman, who gives out magic weapons. What else? I do think a lot of lists can play into them. Just note, you need to identify your strengths. Say you're playing Bradigus, even, who doesn't typically strike you as a Cryx answer. In that matchup, your 5 Blackclads or possibly your Sentry Stones are going to be the things that could end up being the most important. Blackclads and Wayfarers and Stone Shapers in particular are very good against Cryx because their sprays answer almost everything that you want to deal with, as long as you can play them well and position them. Their magic, their spells, so they get around the Styxis thing. There are ways to buff them with like the Fulcrum. That's why I've liked that with Kruger 2. I think Kruger 1, Kruger 2, Una, if you build correctly for it, generally meaning that you're going to need to not just build the standard like all of the Scar spells list. Even the Pureblood will help, but you probably still want more than that. Furthermore, you what other things will work? You want, like I said, magic weapons or a sufficient number of spells that do it. Being able to deal with enough armor, being able to avoid spells, things like that. So I think the Kruger 2 lists people are playing will work. I think Baldur 2 works. I think Wormwood works. I think Una can work. Chromac 1 is probably still incredibly good into them. In fact, he's probably getting better into that matchup because the gun versions of Cryx are starting to decline, and a Warpwolf Stalker with Wild Aggression still kills everything. So I think that's getting stronger. I know I've tweeted some games with Chromac 2 into them. Do that with caution. Those were not... I probably should not have tried to do that. I'm trying to think. I'm probably missing stuff. Wormwood can certainly be built to play into it. Baldur 1, Morvana 1, Mosar. So I mentioned both Krugers. So we definitely have the options here. So that's Cryx in a nutshell. I'm going to kind of wrap it up here. If there's more questions on this, of course, hit up the video comments or the Facebook group or me on Twitter or the Discord that we have, and I would be happy to talk more about it. But for now, that's Cryx, and that's what to expect. So as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.